the product of 3.5 billion years of intimate relationships, right? So you're not just going to step outside of that like you're some whole alien from a different planet, right? You might as well just get down to the fact that that's part of life. And you know, you want to have an intimate relationship, and I think one that's longer lasting, because you have your story and it's unfolding, and your partner has her or his story and it's unfolding, and then you weave those together like a rope, you know, and that makes the stories much, much, much stronger, and it gives you some continuity in your life. It gives you a past that's stable, and it gives you a present that's real, and it gives you a future that's solid and dependable, and it's something that you can rely on when everything around you is moving up and down far too rapidly. And so you want to solve that problem, you know, you want to have and then you want to think, well, what sort of person do you want to have an intimate relationship with? And it's probably not a pushover. You want someone who'll give you a good slap when you need one, which is probably like 6 or 7 times a day. You should just ask for one, right? When you wake up in the morning, that's what you should do. You should turn to your wife and say, you might as well just slap me right now, because I probably deserve it. And you probably do. And so you want someone like that, and they'll slap you into shape a little bit, and then you have some respect for them too. Because you try some little trick and you think, I can get away with this, and it's like, whack! And you think, that's why I married you. So, okay, and then you think, well, what are you going to do about temptation? You know, succumb to it. That's the wrong answer. And there's a reason for that, you know, because I could say, well, you know, you shouldn't succumb to temptation. There's sort of a preachy, finger-wagging thing that goes along with that. But that's not the... See, one of the things I've learned about ethical behavior is that the reason you should act ethically is because there isn't anything better you could do. Like, it's better for you and for the future yous, and it's better for your family, and it's better for everyone around you. It's better. It's not that you should do it. That's weak. And you rebel against that. It's like, who says I should do that? That's not helpful. It's like, no, you want to be sensible about this. You know, well, why not take cocaine all the time? Well, I mean, it's a real question. And psychologists often have this sort of thing backwards, because psychologists are always trying to tie themselves up into knots, thinking, well, why are people addicted? It's like, what sort of stupid question is that? Like, you've all tried your substance of choice. You know bloody well why people are addicted to it. It's really fun. Or it gets rid of your anxiety, you know, or, you know, it's like it's something. And you can get isolated rats addicted to cocaine in no time flat. So there's no mystery about addiction. The mystery is, why aren't you addicted and doing impulsive things all the time? And some of you probably are. But the problem is, you know what the consequences of that are. It's a very short trip downhill. And it's because what you're doing is maximizing pleasure in the moment, but foregoing stability and achievement and everything solid and real in the medium to long term. And so it's a pleasurable, degenerating game, and you end up in a terrible place if that happens. So you have to figure out how to regulate temptation, because it'll auger you in, and that doesn't work. So, you know, you have to regulate your alcohol intake if you happen to be someone who really likes alcohol, and if you're into recreational drugs or casual sex or anything like that, or pornography, all these places that you could slide into that maximize immediate reward but cost you in the long run, you have to have a strategy for that. It's like, why shouldn't I drink every night? You need a reason for that, and the answer is something like, it's got to be something like, yeah, I've got better things to do. That's the right answer. I've got better things to do than that. So, and then what else do you need to know? What are you going to do with your life outside of work? And I don't mean hobby. Jesus, that's bad. That's a bad way of thinking about it. Like, it's good if you have a hobby, but that's what you think about doing with your time outside of work. It's like, that's your life. It's like, what meaningful and productive engagements are you going to set up for yourself so that you can tolerate your existence? You know, because one of the things the existential psychologists pointed out in the 1950s, and they were sort of suffering from the, what would you call it, cognitive aftermath of World War II and all the horrors that were revealed in World War II, is that their realization was that human beings owed something like a debt to existence. You know, you have to pay the price for your wretched existence. And to pay that price properly, you have to be doing something noble and worthwhile. And some of that's going to be your career and your relationship with your family and all that, but you need to have a vision for what it is that you're up to when you're not otherwise engaged. What is it that you could be doing in the world that would be worth getting up for, even when you're not well, even when you're suffering, even when someone close to you has died, right? Even in the depths of tragedy. What is it that you're going to engage yourself with that makes you think, God damn it, man, this is a rough day, but I'm getting the hell at it. And that's not being happy. Right? This is way more than being happy. This is what you do when you're not happy. And that happens to you a lot in your life. And you need an answer to that question for the times when things are really dim and dread. And so you need to know where you're situating yourself. And one thing you can think of is that, well, you could think about trying to make the world a slightly less miserable place. You know, that's not a bad place to start. If you don't know what to do, there's lots of things out there that aren't very good that you could probably help a little bit if you got your act together. And so if you don't know what to do, you could think, well, you know, there's a problem out there in the world. Whatever problem comes to mind for you, think, well, I could probably dare trying to solve that at a small level badly so that I get better at it. And then, you know, when things are falling apart around me, I can at least say, look, I've got this, and this is how I'm contributing. And that's a pillar that you can rest on when things are falling apart. You need that. And so, education's like, okay, well, you know you don't know enough. Obviously, and that's a bad thing because the world's complicated, and the more you know, the less it's going to flatten you horribly. And so, it's good to educate yourself, so you might have a plan for that too, so that you can be a little bit more than you are every day. And so I wrote a rule about that too, which was compare yourself to who you were yesterday and not to who someone else is today. Which I wrote that rule very carefully because you need to have an aim. And if you have an aim, then some people are going to be better at that than you. And then you can get all envious about it. And not only envious, but really hard on yourself. Because like you're just not where you should be in relationship to that aim. And that can make you very bitter and displeased with the world. But it's not a good way of looking at it. It's even though you need that value structure, you need an up. And you need people who are above you even, because at least they're targets for emulation. But you can always think, well, you know, here I am now in my wretched form. And with all my faults, and tomorrow I could be 0.1% better. And that's a pretty good thing, you know, because you've got yourself as the target, and you know you can be slightly better than you are. And then if you do that and that doesn't make you bitter or resentful to notice that you could be slightly better than you are. It's actually kind of hopeful, you know, because, well, that's a pathway to improvement, and so that's a good thing. And so you decide to do that. That's a meaningful way of engaging in the world. That's a good thing to do with your time outside of work. So anyways, I laid all this out in this writing program. And so then the kids would write their plan. And it was really interesting watching this because this just blew me away. It was like, I don't know how to describe it even. It's like, you know, when you look back at the past, you see that people had huge blind spots in their culture. And you thought, well, how the hell could people not notice that that was the case? You know, but here's something we don't do. These students, they had been in school for like 16 years, you know, and they're pretty top of the rung students. Smart, hardworking, most of them. The vast majority of them, because the U of T is actually a very conservative institution, and there's a lot of children of first-generation immigrants there, and they're like pretty desperate about the job market, and they're hitting their books pretty hard. So these were kids who had their eye on the prize, mostly. No one had ever sat them down in their entire life and asked them to spend like an hour writing about what sort of person they wanted to be and why. You think, what the hell? What's going on with that? It's like, how could we possibly have constructed an education system that would spend 15 years trying to help people become educated and never once get them to think hard about who the hell they wanted to be and to justify that? And you need to justify it, right? Because imagine you lay out a path and then you get all doubtful about it, because you will, especially if it's a difficult path and you run into challenges and all that. All that potential you have for thought is going to go after your plan like mad and try to bring you down. That's your doubts. It's like you need some arguments for those doubts. You need like 6 reasons why what you're doing is a good idea. So when those doubts come up, you can say, no, that's wrong. I'm doing this because I got these 6 reasons, and I'm doing this because I've thought it all the way down to the bottom. And if someone gets in your way in an inappropriate way, it's the same thing. Like if you have 6 reasons for what you're doing, no one will ever stop you. Because they'll object, well, why are you doing that? You say, well, I don't know. It's like, you lose. You lose. You say, well, here's the reason. And they say, well, how do you justify that? And you go, well, I have this reason. And then they say, well, you're pretty smart. How do you justify that? And then you have 2 other reasons. And then they get angry and go away. And you win. Or they cry. Yeah. So I had these kids write this as well as part of this narrative course. And so, again, they're writing like mad, like 15,000 words, And they tell me, this is taking way longer than I thought it would. It's like, well, it's your life, It's like, do it as thoroughly as you can. But I used to tell them too, and this is a really good thing to know as well. You can write a really bad plan for your life. And that's way better than no plan at all. And so, if you're going to figure out what you're going to do, you're going to be wrong. And so, you don't have to get all perfectionistic about it, because what the hell do you know? You're going to chart your course, and then you're going to move forward in the world, and you're going to accrue experience as a consequence of moving forward, and then that's going to enlighten you enough so you'll be able to make a better plan. So all you have to do is make a plan that's good enough so that it gets you to your next plan. And I've also watched people for decades now, and they've asked me questions like that, well, what should I do if I don't know what to do? And the answer is, don't wait around. All you do is get old, and you get old way faster than you think. And you're 25 one day and then you're 40 the next. And if you're still 25 when you're 40, that's an ugly thing. It's an ugly thing. And you're not going to be happy about it. So make a stupid plan and implement it. Get bashed around by the world, and it'll tell you why your plan is wrong, and then you can reformulate it. So that frees you up a bit. It's like, well, I'm not that smart and I'm not that wise, but I can make a tentative plan, and as long as I stand back and watch while I'm implementing it, maybe I can learn enough to get to the next step. And that's fine, that's perfect. And so that's a good thing to know. So the kids really liked that. And so then I got together with my partners, and we thought, well, why don't we try this on a larger scale? We'll just build an exercise that people can do online, a guided writing exercise, and we'll let people try it and see what happens. So we tested it at McGill University first. We got these 80 kids who weren't doing well academically, so they were on academic probation. Now, these were kids who had done really well in university or high school because they couldn't have gone into McGill otherwise, so they all had at least an 80 average. They didn't have intellectual shortcomings, but the first year or 2 at university can be rough because you're adapting to the transformation of your life and all of that. And so then we put the kids in one of two groups, randomly. And one group was write about. You did a bunch of self-analysis exercises, a bunch of writing about who you were, but it was all like questionnaire-based. And then the other one was this free writing exercise that was structured but helped you outline what I just mentioned about your future. So the rest of the future-altering exercise is, okay, so you answer those 7 questions. Then you develop a conceptualization of what you'd like your life to be in 3 to 5 years, and you write about that for 20 minutes. And you don't get too obsessive about it. Just think, okay, if I could have what I needed to justify my existence, what would it look like? And then the second half is, okay, well, now that you've got your vision in place, how about a strategy? Lay out a strategy. So that was the whole exercise. So we had kids at McGill do this, and it produced a 30% decline in their probability of dropping out of university. So that just blew us away. Well, it was what we were hoping for, right? And about a 25% improvement in their grade point average. So that was so cool, but also kind of sad, because you think, well, look, all that had to happen was these kids had to have a plan, and then they weren't like flapping about uselessly and blowing in the wind. You think it would have been good if someone would have been helping them develop a damn plan for like a third of the time they were in school. So they were just honed, right? They had a vision of who they wanted to be and why and how they were going to take their place in the world. And were encouraged to think that that was a worthwhile endeavor, and that there were great things to do that they could be doing, even on a local scale, like being a good husband or a good wife or a good father or a good mother. These are not trivial things. They're not trivial things, and people should think about them seriously, and they should take them seriously. Or to be a good neighbor or a good friend, or to be successful in your career, which is one that we really promote in our culture, and fair enough, but it's not everything. So there are things to do in the world that need to be done, and there are problems that need to be solved, and there's enough problems for everybody. So, it'd be really good if we could tell our kids to get their act together and get the hell out there and do something useful, and it's really good for them to hear that. And so then if you get them to do that, say, well, make a plan, poof, they're 30% less likely to drop out of university. So we're pretty happy about this, but it's a small study, 40 and 40, and maybe it only worked at McGill, who knows. So then we went to Holland. A woman there, Michaela Scheepers, she was a professor at the Rotterdam School of Management, and she decided that she would do this with all the first-year business students. And so there's like 1,000 of them. And so they just did it as part of a course assignment. No instruction. They just had the program. It says, write about your future. And so they all wrote about their future. Same thing happened. Got about a 30% decline in dropout. But we did a little bit more distinct analysis this time. So we stratified the people into sex and ethnicity. Just a rough cut. So we used men and women, and we used Westerners, the Dutch basically, Dutch nationals, and non-Western ethnic minorities. And so that would be 4 categories. And then we looked at their previous academic achievement. And so the people who were doing the best were the Dutch women, and then the Dutch men, and then the non-Western ethnic minority women, and then the non-ethnic Western minority men. And the non-ethnic Western minority men were underperforming the women by about 80%. Walloping difference. Now, and there was hundreds of people, and we tested thousands of people in these samples, so the samples were very stable. We did it over a number of years. And so we found 2 things. The first thing is it had a bigger effect on men than on women. Now, we think that's because the women are already doing better. And so if you're kind of set on something and you have a plan, then maybe making a plan doesn't help that much. But if you don't have a plan, it really helps. But this was the coolest thing. 2 years after the group did the study, did the exercise, the non-Western ethnic minority men were outperforming the Dutch women. So yeah, there were hundreds of them in this sample, so it was a robust result. And so that just blew us away. Because for a bunch of reasons, was first of all, well, imagine if you're an immigrant to a new culture, you're pretty disoriented, right? Obviously, because that's part of being an immigrant. And so maybe it's even more important for you to get your bearings and figure out what you're doing and why. So that's one possible reason. But the other thing that was so cool is you always hear, especially in our culture now with its idiot political correctness and its identity politics, that the reason for the ethnic stratification is because of the corrupt sociological conditions of the society. And obviously there's some truth in that, because every society is ethnocentric and parochial to some degree in favor of the majority. It's almost like the definition of society. But here we did a psychological intervention, and it completely obliterated the sociological effects. Completely. And so that was just, well, you don't, as a researcher, you don't feel like doing a football touchdown dance very often. You don't see scientists in the hallway doing that sort of thing, But that was something that we didn't expect, that was really reliable, and that was absolutely excellent. And then recently, we did the same thing at Mohawk College in Canada. We had the kids come in and get prepared for university and their orientation, and they could either do the future authoring exercise for only 90 minutes. They just sat down on the computer and did it cold. They didn't even know they were going to be doing it as part of the orienting. Well, maybe they had been informed, but only minimally. Or they did some other exercise for 90 minutes. It dropped the dropout rate of men in the first semester 50%. 50%, yeah. And so, we took that apart as well. And so, if you hadn't done very well in high school, it had a walloping effect on you. And if you also were in a program that didn't have like a professional designation at the end, so it was like a general arts program, then it also really had a walloping effect on you. So basically, it was a program that was really good for people who hadn't been doing very well because they were kind of lost and still hadn't specified a future. 50% decrease in dropout in the first semester. So, okay, now the reason I'm telling you all that for a specific reason, and the reason is associated with this Rule 10. Be precise in your speech. You're not going to get what you want unless you specify it. That's the first thing. And there's a real reason for that, is that you actually create the world by specifying it in a much deeper sense than you think. So I'll tell you the story about how psychologists discovered that, because this is one of the great scientific discovery stories, I would say, of the last 20 years. Some of you probably know about this experiment already, but I don't think you necessarily know how revolutionary it was. This guy named Dan Simon did these experiments. He published a paper called Gorillas in Our Midst. It was a study of